That's what my contract states. Tidy up and leave a single dime in a sealed envelope. It disintegrated readily in my hands. After 30 years of work, my company is required to pay me this pension. James Anderson, the president at the moment, is the one making fun of me. He was the youthful, second-generation president, and he left me feeling hollow and hopeless. I no longer feel any connection to this company. This corporation no longer values its employees. They have undergone too much change. I just nodded and accepted the packet, saying, "Understood." I immediately went to the room for systems management and erased the data from the company's management system. Although you may find it inhumane, this is a requirement of the contract. I cleaned up in accordance with the contract, just as the president had requested. That is the only thing involved. Hey, I'm unable to send emails. I am unable to access the internal system. What is happening? Moments later, there's a ruckus in the office. The president comes running to me in a panic, looking pale. "Hey Joseph, how are you doing?" Armored, I turned to face him. That was the start of my protracted conflict with the company's second-generation president. Joseph Taylor is my name. I'm 49 years old. I've spent a long time working for the same organization. I've been here since just after high school, making me the oldest employee. In an era where changing jobs frequently occurs, I could be regarded as unique. In my capacity as a manager, I am responsible for system management. Although it might be difficult, I enjoy my rewarding job. Because my juniors have become more capable, I have had less job to do lately. Everything in life has gone well. I apologize, Mr. Taylor. There seems to have been a mistake, but I'm not sure what caused it. Chris Johnson, my outstanding junior, is this person. I turned to look at the screen when he asked. This code is incorrect. This is how it ought to be. Oh, I see. As anticipated, Mr. Taylor. I sincerely appreciate it. Chris smiled brightly, and I couldn't help but laugh. I'll be turning over system management to you shortly. I am depending on you. Oh no, I haven't arrived yet. What topic are you discussing? I'll be 50 years old soon. How do you plan to spend my retirement? You still have over a decade left. Mr. Taylor, you're getting ahead of yourself. Being in his 30s, he hasn't yet realized how rapidly time passes. But until I retire, I intend to put in a lot of labor. After 30 years of work, my company is required to pay me this pension. Systems research is moving at a fast pace, and I will soon lag behind if I don't continue to study. Yes, before that incident occurred, I was content and felt fulfilled in my profession in such a capacity. It came on abruptly. Robert Anderson, the president, required hospitalization after unexpectedly becoming unwell. James, his only son, swiftly rose to prominence as the second-generation president since there was no chance of his recovery. James spoke passionately in his inaugural address. We're all confused by this unexpected event, but now is the moment to come together and develop. Let's make a change right now. His animated speech was a breath of fresh air to the disheartened staff. James exuded a charisma that inspired confidence in his ability to effect positive change. His speech touched me, and knowing him from his time in the subsidiary, I knew he would do a great job continuing his father's heritage. But this hope did not last long. He focused on efficiency and cost-cutting early in his term, implementing abrupt organizational changes, staff layoffs, and human transfers. The office fell into disarray very soon. The way senior, long-serving staff members were treated was the worst. The president began reducing them because he said they were impeding the development of younger employees. Instead of firing them right away, he demoted them and so decreased their pay. Skilled salesmen were transferred to back-office positions, forcing support staff, who failed in their frontline roles, to quit. On the other hand, youthful workers received preferential treatment and promotions if they have the necessary abilities. I would have understood, but in reality, The evaluations didn't reflect their abilities. Talented young workers lost trust in the company and left. Eventually, only the president's young sycophants, who benefited from the undeserved perks, remained. Today, another of my trusted colleagues is leaving the company. He was an outstanding salesperson who boosted our revenue. Thank you for everything, Joseph. Yeah, but why do you have to leave? Who knows, but I'm tired of trying so hard here. Then he sighed and said, Joseph, you're the only one who can manage the systems in this company. You'll be fine. Hang in there. I felt tears rise to my eyes and gazed down at him as he forced a grin. I should be smiling as I wave him off, at least for the final time, viewing the back of a departing buddy. How many times have I experienced this annoyance? You would expect that a strike would result from this, but none did. Gifted individuals just disappeared, leaving only the industrious, the resigned, or the loyalists to President James. I was among the diligent ones. I still had a strong desire to hold onto this firm that I owed so much. The company's performance was clearly deteriorating. As anticipated, President James appeared quite distressed. We'll get over this. It's probably just a reaction to the most recent organizational changes. It resembles crouching just before a leap. When I witnessed him telling his supporters this, I was abhorred. Your remarks are different as long as there are some who are praising him with the phrase, as expected of the president. He'll never own up to his errors. I sighed and went back to the system control room, where Chris was waiting. We had a conversation right away. Big news, Mr. Taylor. The president is coming to inspect the system management room today. What? Rumor has it that, after personnel changes, he's now targeting the company's fixed costs and considering cost-cutting measures for the system. What should we do, Mr. Taylor? Well, there's not much we can do. President James seems to like making cuts to the core parts of the company. It's good that he's enthusiastic about his new role, but his focus is off. After a while, President James arrived at the system management room where we were. He glanced around the room with a puzzled look as if trying to figure something out. Isn't the air conditioning too high? Heating and cooling costs are significant, you know. Computers are sensitive to heat, so it's for management purposes. I see. Ignoring the basic questions from President James, I immersed myself in my work. For some reason, President James only asked questions and talked to Chris. He should know I'm the manager, but he barely acknowledged me. After looking around for a while, he finally spoke to me. Joseph, right? Yes. Surprised, I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. How long have you been working here? 30 years. 30 years? That's a long time. His overly casual tone made me a bit annoyed. Sure, I'm his subordinate, but as someone older, this feels too informal. I noticed that your base pay is rather substantial. Was that the arrangement when you were employed? Yes, it was. But now Chris here is also managing the system, right? Well, yes. Although I felt uneasy about it, this was President James and I's first one-on-one meeting. Seeing this as a chance, I made the audacious decision to advise the president. Regarding the system, Mr. President, I do not advise switching from the one that is in place. President James arched an eyebrow, but I went on. A lot of the employees are currently unfamiliar with their new roles as a result of the recent personnel changes. Adding to that, altering the system will simply result in even less efficiency. It's up to me to decide, President James cut in. I shut my mouth, obviously unhappy with what I had spoken. I had never seen him look that harshly at someone before, but he scowled at me. A worker such as yourself, daring to challenge the president's choices. Recognize your location. I'm sorry. You were the manager, right, Joseph? I'll give you a lot of thought, just like I do the sister. He made a snide comment before leaving. Chris sighed in relief, having been watching our encounter with nervousness. I started to get a chilly sweat. You're incredible, Mr. Taylor. I'm sorry for creating an awkward atmosphere, Chris. No, it doesn't bother me. Your viewpoint makes great sense, in my opinion, but the president was incredibly annoying. How does he think? Probably nothing good. I scowled and gave it some thought. Chris and I then made the decision to talk about our future intentions. When I was summoned to the president's office a month later, President James broke some startling news. What did you say? I expressed my gratitude for your diligence. President James really said that I was being fired. You may now relax. He handed me a small packet and grinned, explaining that it was for business, not personal, reasons. This is your employer pension. Receiving a cheap-looking envelope instead of a bank transfer gave me a bad feeling. Still processing the information, I took the envelope and peeked inside, noticing it wasn't even sealed. Inside was a single dime, a copper coin. Mr. President, this isn't funny, even as a joke. Of course not. It's not a joke. President James placed the document he had been holding onto his desk and motioned for me to look at it. I recognized it immediately. It was the employment contract I had signed 30 years ago when I joined the company. President James tapped a specific section with his finger. See here? It says your employer pension is 10 cents. My eyes widened in disbelief. Next to the section about employer pension, which stated employer pension provided, someone had handwritten 10 cents, clearly written in ballpoint pen. President James traced over it triumphantly. I didn't write this. It was already there. It's an amusing note, isn't it? But you without a doubt signed and stamped this contract, didn't you? This is. I opened my mouth to protest, but President James cut me off again. It's according to the contract. Clean up and leave. His expression told me that arguing was futile. I was probably marked for some time. I represented the kind of long-serving employee President James wanted to push out. The reason I hadn't been targeted yet was because I managed most of the company's systems. However, after his last inspection of the system management room, he must have decided that Chris was capable enough. It's also easy to guess that my advice back then hit a nerve. What a childish and narrow-minded president. A company with a president like this has no future. The faces of my colleagues who were forced to leave before me came to mind. I understood. I smiled and left the president's office. I stuffed the thin envelope into my pants pocket and headed straight to the system management room. I talked to Chris there, who was standing by. Now was the time to carry out the plan, Chris. So it came to this. All right, I'm ready. Chris and I took a seat at our PCs and erased every management system in the organization. Building a system is difficult, but it can be dismantled quickly. After a while, I heard terrified screams coming from different parts of the workplace when I carefully opened the door to the management room. Hey, I am unable to send emails. I'm unable to access the internal system. What is happening? The staff was overwhelmed and powerless to intervene. President James hurried over to me, pale and distraught. Joseph, what did you do? He said something casual to me in his stress. Gently turning to face him, I responded, I just cleaned up as you asked. By personal belongings, you meant. Why did you decide to erase the system? Since the system belonged to me, I erased it. I was merely tidying up the items I had provided to the business. What? I showed him the working conditions notice. Having simply glanced at the employment contract, he must not have been aware of this condition. It was made very explicit in the document that I was lending the system, that my income covered the loan, and that I would return the system when I resigned. What is this document? It's the notification I got from the business 30 years ago. You also probably have a copy on file. I'm not familiar with this. It's ridiculous that one employee leaving means the entire system is rendered useless. I wanted to say, but refrained, that it is insane to offer an employer pension worth a single dime. If you cancel my dismissal, I'll return both the system and this dime. Chris, restore the system immediately. President James yelled at Chris as he pushed my hand away from the packet I had given him. But it will take time. I don't give a damn. Execute the task as soon as you can. Yes, Chris, he replied as he obeyed instructions and started to fix the system. After exchanging a quick glance with him, I departed from the system management room where I had spent so many years working. I quietly stoked a fierce determination to oppose President James. A few days later, while I was relaxing at home, my phone rang. When I looked at the screen, it was the main number from my former company. I answered and heard President James's defeated voice. "Joseph, we're in trouble. Chris is struggling to restore the system, and no work is getting done." These past few days included the weekend, so President James must have assumed the system would be fixed by now. But it wasn't, and the system was still down. On the first day back to work, despite having addressed me informally before, he now humbly sought my help, which almost made me laugh. "So, what do you expect me, an outsider, to do?" "Let us buy the system from you. I'll pay $100,000. "No. $200,000. I couldn't help but laugh at the offer. President James really didn't understand the market value. "Are you joking, President? That amount is peanuts for buying that system." "Peanuts? Then how much do you want?" $1 million. $1 million. His voice cracked, and I was more amused than anything. Even $1 million is a bargain for that system. "What are you talking about? That's more than the employer pension." "Well, it was just 10 cents. That's not what I meant." Realizing it was time to stop messing with him, I straightened up and addressed President James seriously. "President, I'm serious. If you don't buy it for $1 million, you won't get the system, and I won't help Chris either. This is a disaster. Our work is already behind, and if this goes on any longer..." A long silence followed. I waited anxiously for his response, but then he said, "Enough. I won't ask for your help. How dare you demand such an outrageous amount, you ungrateful person." He rejected my final offer and hung up. I felt a wave of disappointment. Despite the opportunity, it was clear that he couldn't be trusted with the company. I picked up my phone again. It was time to execute the next phase of the plan. The next day, a loud noise erupted in the president's office. The noise came from James, the now former president, pounding his fist on the desk. Why am I being fired? Facing him was his father, Robert Anderson. Though not fully recovered, Robert's presence at the desk was still impressive, and I was moved by it. "I'm not firing you. I'm demoting you to an employee so you can learn from the ground up." Me? A former president working as a regular employee? How humiliating. Humiliating is the chaos you cause within the company, bringing it to the brink. This time, Robert slammed his hand on the desk. James, who had been leaning forward, quickly straightened up. Robert reprimanded him with a voice full of authority. "I was a fool to trust your reports. I warned you not to meddle with personnel, yet you forced out so many trusted people, including Joseph." At this, James glared at me. Indeed, I had devised and executed several plans to address the situation. James's reckless actions had been unbearable. Feeling guilty for bothering the former President Robert during his hospitalization, I had reported the current state of affairs to him. Robert had trusted James' reports without question and felt at ease. However, when he saw my report, he was shocked and realized the gravity of the situation. Deciding to return to the company, it pained me to see him push himself when he was still in need of treatment. But when he said, "I'm glad you reported this, Joseph. My foolish son would have destroyed the company I built," I knew I had done the right thing. Chris and I then devised a plan to change the current situation. We knew that if things continued, I would likely be forced out too, so we decided to make the management system unusable to put pressure on James and other unresponsive employees. This was the only form of resistance we could mount as the systems department. As expected, once the system went down, chaos ensued. James couldn't handle the situation, and even his supporters began to lose faith. The hard-working employees finally spoke up. Resign. Bring back President Robert. For the first time, James faced protest from the employees and was brought before the board. They criticized him for forcing out many talented employees. While it was good to bring in younger staff, the treatment of those who had contributed for so long was appalling. The poor handling of the system trouble within the company was also discussed. The topic of buying my system was brought up. If we can use that system permanently for $1 million, it's a bargain. Why didn't the president buy it? It would take an enormous amount of time and money to rebuild it from scratch. Hearing the employees' trust and affection for the current system warmed my heart. I felt proud that all my hard work in developing the system had paid off. After the board meeting, James was demoted in the president's office. He finally accepted Robert's words with his head down, and prompted, he reluctantly apologized to me. "I'm sorry, Joseph," he said, though he still seemed dissatisfied. I simply replied, "Yeah." Robert, having witnessed our exchange, spoke to me. "I'm sorry for all the trouble. Will you really come back to this company?" Seeing his anxious expression, I smiled. "Yes, as long as you stand as the president, of course." "Thank you. Should we go ahead and pay the $1 million for the system as you suggested?" "That's not necessary. I've already received so much from you," I said. I see Robert, and I laughed together. James watched us with a puzzled look on his face. "I'm glad everything worked out, Mr. Taylor. I was really nervous about how it would turn out. You went through a lot, Chris, and you were stuck working through the weekend. I'm sorry about that. If it means making the company a better place, I'd give up my weekends any time. Besides, all I did was pretend I couldn't fix the system." I was back in the system management room with Chris, the key player in this operation. As a technician who had worked under me for so long, he could have easily fixed the system quickly. His outstanding acting was crucial to resolving this situation. Reflecting on the recent events, Chris remarked with deep emotion, "But James was terrible, wasn't he? Offering you a 10-cent employer pension and even faking documents." When he said that, I couldn't help but mutter, "Actually, there's something you should know. The handwritten 10 cents was something I wrote in the contract myself." "What? What do you mean?" With Chris's curiosity piqued, I decided to share an old story with him. It was a story I had never told anyone before, about my younger self and the young president. Back in the day, I was a recluse during middle and high school. I couldn't fit in at school and had trouble communicating. I shut myself in my room and immersed myself in system development, tinkering with my beloved computer. I created original source codes and built my own systems. Robert, my father's friend, heard about my work. He recognized my abilities and offered me a job as a system manager at his company. For someone like me who had been isolated in my room for years, having someone value my creations meant the world. Moreover, he offered me a salary well above average for a high school graduate. Even though I was out of touch with the world, I knew that the amount he was offering was unusually high. I told him I couldn't accept that much, but Robert shook his head. "This is still cheap. Our company is just starting, and this is all we can afford now. But we will increase it with raises. This system is that valuable." I took the job contract in an immature, impetuous moment and wrote something on it with a ballpoint pen. I put 10 cents next to the term employer pension. Robert's gaze expanded. 10 cents. 10 cents is acceptable. I feel bad taking extra money when I leave because I am paid so much every month. This was my suggestion when I was a young student. Though he presumably wanted to chuckle, Robert instead gave a soft grin and continued, "Let's think of this system as a loan to the company. I'll include that in your work contract and provide you with a document later on. You are free to return the system when you depart, but we will buy it right away. Wouldn't that be the employer's pension? Ah, you noticed that. You are incredibly intelligent. His belly chuckle brought me relief. I made the decision to follow him for the rest of my life when I started working there. He was the one who saved me and got me back into the light. Chris inhaled deeply once I had finished this story. So that's what happened with you and the president. Yeah, but I never expected that contract to resurface because of James. Speaking of James, he quit the company not long afterward because he could not bear to be an ordinary employee after serving as president. Along with a friend, he founded his own business, but Robert pointed out that they were having financial difficulties and that things didn't seem to be going well. Robert had numerous obstacles even when he recovered completely and returned. I hoped James would not disturb his dad anymore. Robert said forcefully, "I have to throw him into the valley, just like the lion did." James seemed so driven that I had a sneaking suspicion he wouldn't accept assistance even if he ever asked for it. He had, after all, made the decision to quit the company first. Now that the old president was back, the business was beginning to rekindle its original enthusiasm. To make up for the lost time, Chris and I put a lot of effort into creating a system that is easier to use. I got some unexpected news when I went to the president's office one day. "What? Do you wish for me to work as an executive?" "Indeed. You are my right-hand man now that everything has happened. Eventually, I want you to hold the position of executive vice president. I'm hoping you'll collaborate with me going forward." Executive vice president? My body stiffened as a wave of responsibility washed over me. Taking on an executive role entails managing the entire organization. I would be the president's right-hand guy in my role as executive vice president. Is taking on a role like this really acceptable for someone like me? With his soft eyes as usual, #Robert seemed to perceive my concern. "The next generation is ready, isn't it?" he said to me. "Yes, I'm sure Chris can handle it." "Therefore, no issue exists. Let's get the shareholders meeting ready. Additionally, the executive appointment contract needs to be prepared." Robert and I looked at one another and laughed at the utterance of that word. "Make sure you don't write 10 cents on this one." "Oh, please, hurry up." I refused to. Warmth filled the room as we laughed together. Could I, as an executive, bring back my sad-looking colleagues? I felt hopeful when I left the president's office after having that notion. I was really happy that I had defended this company at the time. I was able to come out of my private life and find happiness under the open sky thanks to this company. Although a contract is merely a piece of paper, it connects people, not just myself in the future, but also other people, through time. I'm moving forward for the first time,